Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the third and final panel discussion staged by the Caribbean School of Media and Communication, CARIMAC, on the theme of adaptability and digital transformation. This week, we will feature industry players in the field of media and communication. Just a reminder that this event is part of the Humanities in Action virtual seminar series. And a special welcome to our viewers on Mona Media and listeners on News Talk 93 FM. The panelists today will discuss the topic preparing for careers in the future, media and communication careers. These current employers, senior managers, and entrepreneurs will share their experience and knowledge of the current industry, trends and changes that are taking place, as well as the skills needed to excel as media and communication professionals in the 21st century. Let me introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is Kiran Maharaj. She's the president of the Trinidad and Tobago Publishers and Broadcasters Association, president of the Media Institute of the Caribbean, vice president of the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce, co-founder of the Caribbean Investigative Journalism Network, managing director of the Caribbean Lifestyle Communication, and founder of Heartbeat Radio for Women. Holding degrees in literature, journalism, business administration, and marketing, she has worked as a journalist in Trinidad and Tobago and as a CNN correspondent. She has received the Woman of Courage Award by the U.S. Embassy in Trinidad and Tobago. Melody Kamak Gale. She's a founder and managing director of Maverick Communications Limited. She holds a BA from the University of the West Indies and an MBA in Global Consumer Marketing from the University of Liverpool. Mrs. Kamak Gale started Communications and Business Solutions in 2000 as a response to the changes in business, commerce, communication, and economic sectors, both in Jamaica and globally. This was later rebranded into MCL. She is the founder, executive producer, and executive producer of groundbreaking television show, Doctor's Appointment. Our next panelist is Rufflin Johnson. She has spent the last 22 years developing her expertise in public relations, crisis management, corporate relations, media relations, special event planning, and employee communications, to name a few. In 2005, she was one of 3 successful candidates in Jamaica who was awarded the designation of Accredited Business Communicator by the International Association of Business Communicators, IABC. She is a trained teacher and holds a BA from the University of the West Indies and an MA in Communications from the University of Leeds. Our next panelist is Damian Mitchell. He has been leading a career in media and communication for over 2 decades. He is an integration editor in charge of the unit responsible for web, news, and social media at The Gleaner, a major daily newspaper in Jamaica. He manages a team of reporters, supervising editors, and social media coordinators, prepares copy for online publication, rewriting and editing to improve readability for multimedia. He holds a degree in political science and criminology from the University of the West Indies, Mona campus. Kevin Jackson. He is a writer, filmmaker, and animator. He teaches script writing and animation at the University of the West Indies, the Hart Vocational Training Development Institute, and Northern Caribbean University. He currently serves as the outgoing president for the Jamaica Animation Nation Network and outgoing marketing and communications director for the Jamaica Film and Television Association, JAFTA. He is also the vice president of the Jamaica Fencing Federation. Our final panelist is Conrad Matheson. He's an executive with extensive corporate marketing experience. He was awarded the Prime Minister's Youth Award for Excellence in 2017 for entrepreneurship, and he has also been accepted into DMZ in Canada. This managing director of its Pixel Perfect Limited has led consumer-facing digital and social media programs in partnership with several local brands. He has developed strategy and led the launch of all Television Jamaica's social channels, social listening, social TV, and live coverage programs for the last 3 years. So there we have our esteemed panelists of media and communication professionals. But before we begin, let me encourage you to utilize the chat feature of the YouTube channel and to type your name, your questions, your queries, or comments. Please let us know where you're from. I know we have listeners from around the region and the world. Your feedback is important to us. So ladies and gentlemen, thanks once more for joining me. This is part 3. You are the top notch, you are the top level of media and communication in the Caribbean. Many of our listeners are not only fellow professionals like yourself, but also students. So some of the questions we're going to tackle today are relevant to the changing needs of the sector. Of course, during this time, many persons have been forced to work remotely, to work from home, and there have been many challenges, certainly for citizens, but also for the working individual. My first question is to Kiran Maharaj, who has extensive corporate experience in Trinidad and Tobago. Adaptability and digital transformation, what is it and how are the two related?
So first of all, thank you very much for having me, and a special good afternoon, not just to my fellow panelists, but to all of the students and to everyone who is listening and viewing as well throughout the Caribbean and possibly beyond. Let me start by saying that I am very disheartened about the passing of the Data Protection Bill, which does not guarantee an exemption for journalists. I think that that can actually be a very big blow to the Press Freedom Index for Jamaica. So I want to say that it is important for us to recognize in this time of adaptability and digital transformation that things like the Data Protection Bill are the types of legislation that we need to be very cognizant of. And when I say we, civil society, so even you, the students, you have a role to play because this is how your future is going to be shaped in this digital transformation landscape. So, Dr. Obika, I think that it's a very important question to start with because I believe in the term digital Darwinism. I do not think that this is an era that will pass. I think what we will see are phases of digital transformation. So if we want to survive, we must adapt. And to me, that is where the adaptability comes into play. So we have to always be prepared. We're in a constant state of preparedness, and we have to understand that the world we live in now will constantly face disruption. Now, people hear disruption and they think negativity. I don't think so. I think there are lots of opportunities with disruption, and we must think of disruption as being something creative. Because remember, what happens with the digital transformation is that technology is being enabled by imagination. And I think that that is one of the greatest opportunities for young people. So there are certain concepts that are going to remain forever now in our vocabulary. IoT, the Internet of Things, data analytics, AI, which is artificial intelligence, connectivity, algorithms, all of that, those are now going to be everyday phrases that we all have to be familiar with. From a leadership position, I think what it means is that we are perpetual students. We have to be ready and willing to learn new things every day because nothing will stay the same. And I hope that students in particular pay attention to that, because if you all think it's difficult learning, it's worse for some of us who are ahead of you because we are not growing up in that world. We are not screenagers, we're not accustomed to that second screen. We are learning it. So for media, digital transformation is really linked to what I see as three trends. The multi-channel experience is one of them. Customized content, because the user is now in control, and the virtual and mixed reality. And if you're a student of journalism, that is why multimedia journalism becomes so important. And we have seen these trends even with news media. Online communities, radio stations are no longer just radio stations. And I know that we're streaming on one of the stations right now. But if you look at the social communities for radio, you will see that we are publishing our stories online. We're using images a lot more. There is the virality because we can share the stories. So we're not just in radio anymore. And it's like that for all traditional media. Traditional media is now married with digital media, and that is how we are adapting. Business models are being reinvented. We have come from the era of radio soaps, right? And radio news, and that's what radio is all about. To going into that era of audiobooks, everybody had Walkman, and we would listen to our Walkman and listen to audiobooks. And then that developed onto CDs. And now we're back to podcasts and podcast channels. So the delivery changes, the distribution systems change, but the content remains. So there is a saying, content is king. And I like that saying, but my add-on to that is if content is king, then distribution is queen. And to me, that is how I see adaptability and digital transformation, especially as it relates to media.
Thank you, Kiran. You've said a lot, and to use a cricket terminology, you've hit a six, starting off with lots of important terminologies that I want some of the panelists to unpack. The Internet of Things. You spoke about the Darwinism, the technological changes that need to happen for us to be able to function. So I want Ms. Johnson, I want to move from Trinidad, come to Jamaica, and ask Ms. Johnson, who is working in, I don't want to call it a hot seat, but in an area where public relations is extremely critical. And you have had to make numerous changes, break down for you what adaptability and digital transformation means in your context.
Well, first I should say thank you so much for having me, and welcome to all the viewers from wherever they are in the world. We want to thank you for joining us and for giving us the opportunity to share with you. All right, so to build on what Kiran had just said, Dr. Obika, she spoke of Darwinism, and we know the concept of Darwinism, where only the strongest of the lot will survive. And when you think of adaptability, you immediately recognize that adaptability really speaks to the fact that you have to understand how you respond to change. How do you change? When things become hectic, when things become different and new, what do we do? To use a cliched expression that we usually have, where when the world throws you lemons, what do you do with it? You make lemonade. So JPS, where I work, of course, I work in the utility sector, electricity utility, and we are in the hot seat right now. It's really, really very crazy. And we have customers coming to us from all different, from all different angles. And we have a lot of issues to contend with. And one of the issues that we contend with on the inside is how do we utilize digital transformation to reach our customers when we serve all different types of customers. We're serving from someone who is maybe 17 years old all the way to someone who's 90 years old who does not have any relationship at all with the digital technology. And so it is, how do we survive and how do they survive to maintain that relationship that we have with them? So Darwinism, yes, comes into play as we think of it, where how are we going to survive? What's our ability? What's the quotient that we have? What's our adaptability quotient as a utility to function and to meet our customers, give them what they want, still meet their needs, still supply them with power, still interact with them, still engage them, and still do business with us, and still remain an successful and viable entity. So we have those things to contend with. And what it really means is that you have to put the two together. Adaptability and digital transformation go hand in hand. They're like partners right now, because you have to adapt in order to function, to remain successful. And as you utilize the technologies that are there and available to make you successful, how do you actually get everybody on your team to adapt, to change their mindset? Because even within the entity as well, there are persons who are not savvy. They're not really moving in that direction. They can't see the value sometimes of, why do we want to utilize technology to do this when we could just do it another way? But we're forced to. Right at this point in time, we have no choice. That's where we are. We're now forced to engage the technology. And so it is that we have to open up our minds and be objective and be, how adaptable are we? Are we going to win this, or are we going to come out on the other side as losers? How are we going to survive as it relates to the technology that we have available for us to use right now?
Thank you. I love the terminologies from Darwinism, the evolution, to survival being the last term that you used, and the transformation.
And the adaptability quotient, yeah.
Exactly. So the transformations that are needed, not only for profit, but to be able to function at all. And I want to bring in an entrepreneur, someone with over 30 years of experience traversing both media and the corporate sector. Melody, what can you add in terms of the notion of adaptability and the transformations that are needed? So Melody, you can, yes, unmute.
Yes. So thank you for having me, and my colleagues have started out brilliantly. From my perspective, in this almost chaotic setting, this digital ecosystem, it is super dynamic. So, how do we as business leaders, as head of business enterprises, how do we adapt to the changes? And so making sure that the core concept of adaptation becomes the new architecture in strategizing. So I think as a leader too, it's hardly enough that we think of changing. It is more, how do we become agile? Agility is going to be key in all of this. It's not just a change. So we have to not depend on the younger employees anymore. We too have to be on board with all the trends in the industry and even in the greater marketplace. We have to remember that the customer now, they don't just develop standards based on what they experience by buying the products. They develop expectations based on every single interaction that they have in the digital landscape. So as business leaders too, we have to know and how to use the technology and the data to make our business smarter and make smarter strategic decisions.
So I am particularly interested in that word you used, agility, and it really brings me back to the struggle, almost a generational struggle that many employees have had to face, where technology has come to play a much bigger role, and there's a dependence on the younger demographic. But many of the younger demographics still have to have some of those important skills that Rufflin was speaking about. I wanna unpack something that Kiran started to allude to. We will discuss policy a little later, but a point was mentioned where the Data Protection Act and the impact on the journalist. I don't know if you wanted to, because I want to have a conversation now between what Kiran is saying and also someone like Damian, who is actively engaged in the field of journalism. So Kiran, I don't know if you wanted to elaborate on that point.
Well, I think what the issue really is that when it comes to the release of information as regards to our sources and naming them, the Data Protection Act will now put journalists in a situation where you may have to give that information to the data collector. when this act was a bill and it was being discussed and we had consultation, Media Institute of the Caribbean and the TTPBA, along with several other colleagues, joined with PAJ to express our concern, because we have had that same bill come to us in Trinidad and Tobago, and we realized that it could be detrimental to our sources and to things like investigative journalism. So I think that it is sad if this goes through and no amendments are made.
All right, thank you very much. I don't know if Damian, if you wanted to share anything, because I know we will talk about policy later, but this element of adaptability, that's it's not just a term being bandied about. From as far as Europe, data protection legislation is being enforced. What are some of those changes that a journalist has to make to adapt to this new changing landscape?
Well, there are several things that journalists have had to be doing in respect of ensuring that they are adapting to the changes in the landscape. I'll come back to the issue of the data protection a little bit further on, but I wanted to make the point and to pick up on something that Rufflin was talking about. Rufflin was speaking about competition in her sector in respect of attention and fulfilling the needs of the respective customers that she has. So there is an internal competition there to ensure that you are assisting and in effect serving each of those customers that you have. In the larger media landscape, there is an issue also of competition, and that competition is not coming from your traditional mainstream media. It's coming from the people who are on their original Facebook accounts, they're on their individual YouTube accounts, they're on their WhatsApp, which for us is the largest social media platform. So you find that traditional media also have a significant responsibility. In fact, it's obligated to ensure that it adapts to these changes so that it can be meeting the needs and the expectations of its own customers. There's another very important point. So frequently, people who are in media come to the realization that you are no longer in a formal situation of adaptability. There's also an informal element to it. And the points I just raised a while ago would help to support that. Right? But another issue that generally comes about as a result of adaptability and change is that of quality. And the question is asked, I'm sure Kiran could relate to this. Is it better now than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago? And there's always that debate, is it better now or are you seeing more now? And the other issue of the competition that exists has to be weighed against the balance of the importance of the media in which we operate. Because there's so many people out there who are providing information. But at the end of the day, you're going to be asking yourself the question, how credible is this? And so frequently you find that people come back to the same traditional media outlets to verify the information that's out there, because there's a higher standard, there's a higher bar, there's a greater expectation of the traditional media. But it does not mean that the traditional media is going to remain in that phase of only into television, only into radio, only into newspaper. You also have to adapt and embrace the changes across the media landscape in order to survive.
Nice, thank you very much, Damian. I want to shift gear now because we've heard from persons involved in corporate communications, journalism, entrepreneurship, as well as the corporate sector, government. I want to shift gear now to what this new learning landscape is going to look like. Because the process of obtaining those skills has also changed. I mean, gone are the days where you go to just these institutions and they're the bastions of the knowledge, and they're the only ways in which you can get this knowledge. I want to ask Kevin, who I know is involved in the training process at many different levels from JAFTA to CARIMAC. Explain the new digital learning landscape and what it means for media and communication workers. Kevin.
All right, so as we know, digital learning itself is not a new thing, but it's something that's ever evolving. And, we've moved from face-to-face learning to learning management systems, which are basically virtual classrooms, now to self-paced, self-customized learning. And this is interesting because with self-paced, self-customized learning, yes, in most cases, you have the problem where, you know, the standards are not exactly guided by, you know, the way you'd have a school have their staff to guide that curriculum. But at the same time, it is a very efficient and effective way of learning because the technology is changing so fast, right, that persons have to now seek information and seek knowledge in informal ways, like Damian was saying. And you're seeing platforms pop up like Udemy, Coursera, Skillshare, where you have experts in industry now creating courses online, and persons can take these courses self-paced. And it's very important for persons to adapt to this new landscape, because what you're going to find, especially when it comes to bridging the gap between more developed nations and, you know, ourselves, where we might have a lack of the higher end equipment, we have to be using technology, you know, to bridge those gaps and advancing our needs. So the things that media and communication workers are going to have to be thinking about is, you know, investing in themselves, looking at all these platforms and finding information that is pertinent to their field, because gone are the days when you would just learn about, you know, how to operate a TV camera or how to animate in this specific software. What is happening now is that there's a shift where the technology for cameras is always advancing. Almost every month there's a new camera out, and as we know, virtual reality and augmented reality are becoming a mainstay and are definitely going to be the future. You know, even simple things as set designs. You know, we're going to be seeing a lot of media moving from your studio space to just like we have here, where we are in our very own comfortable spaces, but we'll be able to change the background using extended reality or mixed reality, as some people call it, right? Where we can have a professional looking set right in the comfort of our homes. And we're going to need to learn to adapt as quickly as possible. And the truth is, some of the persons in media, the younger persons, may have already been doing this, especially in animation and film, where, you know, we constantly have to be on top of, you know, the technology. But persons who have been around for a little while longer and are used to the more traditional technology, they too are going to have to adapt, like some of my colleagues have already said. You know, we definitely can't operate as business as usual because some of the information that they'll need may not be in your traditional institutions as yet. You know, they'll have to go through longer vetting processes. Meanwhile, we have experts who are providing this information, even in things like forums online. You know, when a new technology comes out that can really help to advance a small, medium-sized business, it is not necessarily going to be in your traditional school right away. It is something that you might have to search for answers with other persons who are experimenting with the technology and providing the information that they know, right? So that you can, you don't have to go through the trial and error. So
Definitely.
these are.
So,
yeah.
I mean, I want to bring in, thanks for that, Kevin. I want to bring in Conrad, because as a company that would have started small to do very much the same thing that, Kevin, that you're referring to, about utilizing that agility, and someone who's pioneered TVJs, for instance, their digital presence. I really want to hear your take, not only on the changes and the adaptability and digital transformation issues, but also persons coming to you. I know you hire a lot of young people. That learning landscape, what is it going to look like?
Thank you. So I really appreciate the points. He spoke about some very solid points about being self-paced and self-development, but I want to like bring it back. So bringing it online is a very, very important part, because students get an opportunity to watch the same video more than once, where lectures sometimes does not provide. And not everybody is at the same pace. So that video component, students watching and using learning management systems really help them to go back, watch that video more than once, get certain little nuggets that they didn't get in that first time. So what we have to be looking at for the future is trying to find that mixture, because I have been employing students online. It works for some, but I also would say, despite it's digital, it doesn't work for some students as well. So a mixture of both, of some learning online, which most, if not all students require that physical not explanation, but practical as well. So I would say from a theory point of view, what we have done internally in our business is that we have asked a lot of our students to learn some basic things. So we'll say, if you're gonna do a digital marketing job for us, there are some key courses you must do. So it's like we'll say, if you are on YouTube, go to thinkmedia.com, and they have camera equipment. If you're into media, go to Think Media, and they will tell you about the camera. So we don't have to be always telling them what is the changes to the new cameras. YouTube, that's already there. And if it's Facebook, we're saying to them, hey, Facebook has a course, which is an online course for you to understand it. There's Twitter Flight School for you to understand what simple understanding from what your friends are.
All right, you seem to be breaking up a bit, Conrad.
Try to say to them that.
Sorry to interrupt you. You seem to be breaking up there a bit, but I get the gist of the points that you're making, and I'm not certain that many companies do exactly what you do. Feel free to respond. In terms of having a suite of digital courses where persons that you hire can utilize to obtain the skills that you need. Not so, Conrad?
Yes, correct. So what we have done is also, we have built what we call a university internally that has brought for how they develop. It's actually a thing that we actually crafted to say, these are some basic tools, skills, online learning courses that must be packaged together over a period of time, maybe over a 3-month period, that you must do to get to the basic level. So that is something that I think Jamaican companies need to sit down and think Caribbean need to build out going forward, so that there can be some level of success overall going forward. So excellent. That is something point, I think if we sit down and start saying how.
Definitely. So hopefully companies can continue to follow your lead, because you're doing pretty well across the Caribbean. Feel free to talk about that when next I pose a question. But there are limitations, Damian. Of course, we speak about the learning process, but there are persons on the other end of the spectrum who don't necessarily have that access. So when we speak about the new learning landscape, will some people be left out? I mean, what does it mean for the media worker?
Well, some people will be left out. In fact, if you should think about what's happening in Jamaica, certainly as a result of the coronavirus and the measures instituted by the government to continue learning from home, so many people are left out. The fact is, yes, there has been an increase in respect of internet penetration. Do not have 100% internet coverage in Jamaica. And as a consequence, a digital landscape, digital changes will be disadvantaged together, because you are thinking about the access to digital information outside of your own personal space at home. So for example, in schools, you have it being used, but they will not have the 100% advantage in an environment where there is a lack of internet penetration for 100%. But there's a very critical point that was raised a while ago by Conrad that I think I really need to follow up on. And yes, businesses do need to retrofit, but also institutions like Caramac and those others who are providing media training also need to take a serious look to say, am I retrofitted sufficiently for this digital age? So for example, do I need to revisit a 3-year program versus a 4-year program? Do I need to say, okay, fine, specialization is going to be in the final year, and then I'm going to seek to ensure that the product, like the student I'm putting out into the environment, has a broader general idea and general knowledge as to how to operate in this digital space? I mean, these are some of the things that we really need to start looking at in a very serious way. Mind you, we really should have looked at them years ago, but we're at that point now where digital is so very important in our daily lives and our daily functions to make money and to keep a career and to be relevant. And as a consequence, I'd like to expand it beyond just businesses to looking at institutions, media training institutions, and what they are offering.
Wonderful point. And I can tell you that at Karamak, one of the leading schools of media and communication, that's something that we've been doing on an ongoing basis, albeit the point you mentioned about retrofitting doesn't come without some challenges, finances, etc. But nevertheless, it is extremely important. Very good point, Damian, that you've made there. Now, I know many of our students are wondering, okay, you're about to graduate and you're facing an uncertain prospect for employment when many companies are still struggling to make the adjustment to talk about what Conrad, to reach a stage that Conrad has referred to. I want to ask to Melody, as someone who's been an employer for many years, as an entrepreneur, but also in corporate, what are some of the new skills needed by employees to function in the increasingly digital industry, and specifically, what are employers looking for? Melody.
For me, I place a lot of emphasis on how someone responds to the culture of the organization and their mindset, even more than their knowledge and even their experience. I think that's very critical. And so I place a lot of emphasis there. But also in terms of the other skills that I'm looking for and are relevant now would be, you know, if you understand consumer behavior, because as my colleague said, consumer is no king, and they are responding so much differently now with all the digital advancements. So it's important that there should be even a course. Damian was just speaking to that, you know, on behavioral economics. So what are the factors now, the psychological and emotional and cultural elements that form habits and you know, dictate to a consumer what it is that they need and want and so on. So I think that's very important. And I'm looking for persons who can analyze data. The good thing about the digital revolution is that data is at your fingertips. So how do you analyze the data to make strategic decisions? Not just for today, but in terms of proactively looking at tomorrow, you know? So the analytical tools, using analytical tools, and how your mind works by way of analyzing the data. So that's important for me.
I want to bring in Kiran as someone who has also been an employer with the Chamber of Commerce and engaged with multiple private and public sector institutions. What are you looking for? What are some of those skills that this new employee would have to have? And well, I use new in inverted commas.
Well, I hire a lot of people, you know, regularly for the radio stations in particular. And let me tell you, what I really look for are critical thinking skills. I think it's something that's lacking. I look for people who can tell me about the world around them and have an opinion about it and articulate it properly, especially in the media world. I'm actually going to be hiring people tomorrow for our newsroom. And, you know, I went through what am I looking for? Social skills is very important. Your ability to adapt to whatever situation you are placed in is very important. Being a team player is very important. Things like your professionalism. I have a concern that, in today's world, especially for the younger students who are out there, you all get so used to having lengthy chats on WhatsApp, and with text messages, that I have a grave concern that when you come into an office environment, you're not that great at talking to the person next to you. I've seen it, we try to deal with it in here, but I'm telling you, your social skills have to be up to par, because when you're part of a team and you have to think together to win together, then how you interact with each other becomes very significant. Mental health, that's the other thing I look for. I want to know that the person I am hiring has an okay balance. I don't expect you to be happy every day, but I expect that you are able to balance your sense of emotion with your sense of logic so that you have some stability, and that adds to your professionalism. It adds to the way you will be self-motivated through that positive attitude, and it will definitely help you develop a proactive nature. That's what I look for.
Thanks for that. I think the point about mental health is something that many of us, even employers, we have to look into, because it's not been easy to make the adjustments that have had to be made to be able to function from home. Many of us with families to take care of, in the midst of all of that, sometimes sharing spaces and devices with struggling internet. So the changes have been really tough. I want to bring back Conrad, because I know some of those many young people that you hire, even if they may have the ability to utilize a particular program, I'm sure that there are other things that you're looking for.
Right. It's a critical point. I think some of the points coming earlier that are critical. I think there's a technical skill and there's a soft skill component. And I thought the first couple of comments that came in was about analytics and also about mindset. But let me jump back to analytics first. So this group of students are coming out right now. They are creative, especially in the media landscape. They are creative driven. But because of this digital landscape, there are certain things that they need to understand, that now it's a data-driven situation, which is you'll be saying, hey, I know your creative is very good. However, you need to consider some things based on what the data is saying. And I don't think they have ever been exposed to that kind of situation. And I think now is a very good time for them to appreciate that going forward, that understanding that data will inform their decisions going forward is going to be a very critical point for them. So data is going to be very, very critical. So for us, I would say to them, this video, normally you build up the video and you get in the middle of the video is where maybe the climax is, and then you break it down. But in the short attention span of this generation, you have to move that video excitement straight to the front in 15 seconds to get it out. And it's only the data that's going to show you that. But on the second point of that, we'll just go back on the soft skills. Now we hire on soft skills because we believe technical skills can be taught if the person has the level of aptitude and to learn something. But normally soft skills is more important to us. So for us, adaptability, being nimble, we love people that we call it here a learning animal, which is people that will willingly go out to learn what is new. And we call YouTube the greatest university. So if you can know that, okay, I'm having challenges with doing this Twitter campaign, it doesn't need a Twitter course. You can just go out and look for something and go learn it and move forward. The communication and relationship skills is a major challenge for young people right now, I believe. Because as they said about the WhatsApp communication, most of them don't want to talk. They don't want to talk over the phone. They don't want to talk to customers. They prefer to WhatsApp a customer. In a business context, not all the time a WhatsApp communication is appropriate. So for us, it is for them to understand that there are some social skills that are necessary at this point. But they still have to make sure that they also learn those technical skills. So I would just say to them, gain as much exposure as necessary and as much experience. So go learn, go to RGR, go to some of those places and get some necessary experience, because I realize a lot of them don't have any experience after 4 years of university.
Exactly.
So go volunteer, go learn, and go get that additional work experience. So somebody else could tell you, this is how you dress. Another very important part is that their appearance and how they carry themselves to the work world is like, we are still at the university. So I would just love to say to them that have this mindset, have an open mind. The university as well has taught them certain ways, but this new generation, this new world order will require them to have a different mindset and something that was never taught in school. So that is something for them to consider.
Thank you, Conrad. You've raised a number of points from dress. I want to bring in Damian quickly, and of course, Rufflin, who has also been involved in recruitment. Damian?
Yes, I think Conrad is just so spot on, because I wrote down the issue of soft skills that he spoke about a while ago. Soft skills is what I look forward to when I'm making a recommendation for hire. But there's one other very critical thing for me and for anybody who is entering the field of media and journalism, and that is a fire in your belly. It has to be something that you want. You have to have that knack for it, and then you train that person in order to be able to effectively execute the functions. If you do not have that fire in your belly, it's not for you. So, I always say to people that everybody consumes media, but media is not for everybody. If you are going to be a stakeholder who is going to create a difference and make a difference in respect of the profession, then you have to have that fire in your belly. You have to have that willingness to learn and to adapt, and you have to have those soft skills. In our newsroom, for example, just a quick note in respect of the issue of analytics, we have a board, well, it's a TV really, maybe about a 52-inch TV, that tells us the top 10 stories for today, the top 10 stories for yesterday, the top 10 stories for the last 7 days, and importantly, the top 10 stories for the last 30 days. And it is so amazing that as editors, we would sit and say, okay, fine, our lead story for today has to be the budget, which has gone up by $50 billion or has been decreased by $50 billion. But that may land number 10 on the board or none at all, which says to us that simply putting out numbers in respect of budget is not reaching the consumers. You have to go back and see how can you make this issue of budget, which is critical for every single person, sexy, attractive to them. So the issue of analytics has to be very, very important. And we as journalists are challenged all the time to use this information in order to connect with our customers.
Excellent, thank you. And for someone in PR, how do you, Rufflin, measure that fire in the belly that Damian has just mentioned? But you can also let me know what are the things you look for.
Well, from the PR perspective, we definitely want to make sure that whoever we hire, they come to us with the tenets, understanding the tenets of public relations, which means that no matter what you're doing, no matter whether you're on social media, no matter where you're actually sharing with our customers, with our audience, you must make sure that you maintain the information that is fair, it's honest, it's accurate, has to be truthful. So we don't want persons to come to us with half-hearted responses. What I find a lot of or younger persons do these days is that they superficially research a topic and then they want to share that information without delving properly into the content to really get the full understanding of a story. So you might end up with something being published that is not necessarily completely true. It may be a half of the truth, but we want it to be completely true. So you have to maintain that, understanding what PR does and make sure that you abide by the tenets of public relations. So as it relates to the skills, the other skills that we would like to have within my entity where I work, we definitely have the critical thinking, that's key. We definitely want the analytics, but the soft skills are big for us as well. And if you know JPS, you know that most of our audience, they're usually, I see Damian laughing, our customers come at us very, very, very strong. They're very angry. They say just about anything that comes to their mind. And so what will happen is that a lot of persons are used to dishing out, like young people are used to going on social media and dishing out the dirt. But when you work at a JPS, the dirt comes at you. Can you sit in your chair and take that bashing and that beating from somebody and still respond in a very objective manner, very neutral. Make sure that your tone is very calm and you're just giving information without going back at them and being angry and dissing them, because you can't do that. So you have to be resilient, you have to be strong, you have to be emotionally intelligent, and you have to make sure that your communication is strong, but at the same time it's very calm and very respectful, and you maintain that integrity that the company would want, the brand that the company actually comes with. We also want to ensure that persons come to us understanding the gamut of the social media and traditional space. So you need to understand how customers behave on Twitter. How are they different on Instagram? How are they different on Facebook? And then when you go back to the traditional space, how do they react, so that you're a creative communicator? You're able to go through all the various channels and still maintain the content that is relevant to the various audiences in the space that we're talking to them.
Thank you, Rufflin. I mean, I can't imagine being in your seat at the moment, but I can well imagine that you have to have those skills, those soft skills that you're referring to. I want to shift because we have a number of questions and we're quickly running out of time. Kiran had mentioned a point earlier that content is king, all right? And I want to bring in someone who's big on content, Kevin. The question I have for you, Kevin, describe what digital transformation and adaptability means for us as audiences of users and content, because of course, many of us are sitting home looking at YouTube, accessing stuff on Netflix, right? But that model of us simply consuming has been disrupted by the technology, where many of us are also creators. Can you shed some light on that? So you can unmute.
So this is a very interesting topic, and yes, I want to jump back on Kiran's. Her line exactly was, content is king and distribution is queen, and that is very true. We started from a place of, you know, people going to the playhouse to watch plays. Then the cinema came out. People wondered if the cinema would kill the theater, and then after the cinema, the TV came out, and then the VCR, cable, internet, and so on. But one of the things that remained was that content was, I would say, monopolized. You know, it was handed to you or dictated to you how you watch your content, when you watch your content. So you would have to, you know, set your schedule to watch the specific shows that you want. Now with the advent of the internet, you know, you can watch content anytime you want, anywhere you are, because you can get the content on your phone, you can get it on your tablet, you can get it on, you know, your laptop. And even in terms of learning, for example, kids are now learning from their you know, iPads, you know, and phones, and they're getting the content from the internet. And the internet has created many decentralized platforms. So YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, persons, like you said, persons are creating content and people are looking for this content. I would say that right now, persons have more access to content, but the content is now harder to find because there's so many different platforms. You know, at one point in time, when we wanted to watch a movie or a documentary, we'd go to the Blockbuster and rent. But now Netflix came about. People laughed at Netflix when it came out. And now, coming off the heels of Netflix, we now have to choose between Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, Quelly TV, Apple TV, Disney Plus. The consumer is now more confused than ever as to where they're getting their content from. And on top of it, it's getting more expensive because you have to subscribe for all of these platforms. So that becomes a challenge. This is why I say, you know, that there's more access, but it's harder to find things because, you know, things are distributed all over the place. But at the same time, what we are finding is that it's creating a new kind of content. Content creators are doing their own version of the news. I saw recently where a gentleman was doing the news in poetic form. And there was a company called Listen Me that used to do the news in DJ or song form. And this, in my opinion, was a breakthrough in the sense that you're distributing the news in a way that people understand, people can enjoy, you know, it can captivate people. I think it was Conrad who said it, that no, you have to kind of excite people and capture them in the first 15 seconds. And that is what people are getting when they are utilizing the technology that exists today. And what I think is going to happen in the future is that we are interestingly going to be heading back to a cable sort of situation, meaning because we have all these platforms all over the place, what you're going to find is that somebody's going to have to come up with a service at some point that allows you to tailor the library of content that you want through one channel. It's already happening with servers like Plex, where people will curate content and put it in one space and you can access whatever. So for example, if you have a Netflix subscription, but you don't have an Apple TV subscription, and a show comes out on Apple TV that you want to watch, somebody has downloaded it and put it on, a server that they've used to watch it later on, and they're sharing access to that server. At some point, something like that is going to become more formalized, because people are going where the content is, or they want the content, but they can't afford all these different platforms.
Definitely, Kevin. I want to quickly bring in Conrad, who had made a point about quality, because I know that that's an issue. How do you then create quality content, or as a consumer, are we as consumers knowledgeable about this quality that Kevin has referred to?
Well, I think a lot of times I want to make sure the students don't feel like we're bashing them, and that this is an opportunity for them to be exposed to the stuff. But we all here as professionals are here to help significantly and to guide. So I don't think anybody here is saying you must have all the skills up front, but it's the mindset that we are looking for. But to answer your question, that is critical, quality. The thing is, we have been in companies for a long time, and what is happening is that most companies are aware of, and most people go into marketing or into content, they are aware of creating communication for a brand. So this is my brand, and I need to tell the customers out there what I am all about, right? But where the quality content comes in is the content that resonates with a specific customer group. So it's like JPS have different customer groups. There are some that are digital, and there's a different type of quality content that's going to resonate to that customer group. Then there may be some more senior people that is there, that they're going to need different types of content. So quality content is not necessarily the megapixels in the video. That's not what quality content means. Quality content right now means content that resonates. And what is happening is that people do not create enough content that resonates to their customers. So it's, I am a traditional media house and I communicate this way, right? But what is happening is that, as I was saying about the listening, there's a dancehall version of the news and there's other versions of the news. It's not because we are bashing the traditional news. That is for a particular customer. There's another type of customer that only likes dancehall content, and that content needs to be packaged for that audience, and that is quality content for them. So what is happening now is that we need to create content that delights a particular customer, turn them into fans of sorts. And then after that, we can look into how we turn them into customers. And that is the mindset, that customer-driven mindset is what we need all these students to make sure they understand. You are creating content either for yourself or for your friend, but you're not creating content for a brand. You're creating content for the brand's audience. And that's just my take on what quality means.
And I mean, you've made some very good points, especially about the importance of the consumer and the use of data. And a company that has had to make drastic changes, I want to bring in Damian for a quick point on this. I mean, as the Gleaner has had to make changes, because I know many people still purchase the physical copy. But you are someone spearheading the digital transformation. I mean, how has the Gleaner had to change their mindset to be able to remain relevant?
You know, in a very funny way, some people call it futuristic, but I remember many years ago, I've been here at the Gleaner for just about 17 or so years, and I remember many years ago, we were beginning to transform radio into an online component. So, you were taking radio scripts and reworking them for online, and it was seen as transformative, right? And it's almost amazing how in so many years, in fact, just a few years, the expectation for immediate news has changed. I'm coming from the era when you get your news twice a day or thrice a day. Morning news at 7 o'clock, 12 o'clock and 5 o'clock for radio, and probably you can stay up for 7 o'clock news. We've had to make that transition. The challenge that remains in media now, and I'm sure Kiran could probably help me here, is how do you monetize digital form of information through the, well, it's almost becoming traditional now, through the traditional Twitter, Instagram, and so on. There are some elements and some ideas as to how to do this, but I don't think the Caribbean has yet perfected that, because there is the expectation of those who are consuming the information that since it is available everywhere else on this platform, then you should also give it to me free. Not thinking in terms of the quality information that you're providing, etc., and that it takes, you know, some amount of resources to make this happen. But the Gleaner has been, I would say, leading in respect of the region where the digital transformation has been. It has been difficult. It's also reculturing people who would have been coming from the print era, or the person who is a full man. You have to be able to take a story that appears in print, create a version for your online medium, create a version for your Facebook audience, create a version for your Twitter audience, and that person who has 15 seconds of attention to give you. If you don't hold it there, then you are going to be in problems. So it's a constant challenge for us, but I'm satisfied that we really have been managing to adapt to the changes, and we have been progressing.
Thank you, and certainly companies like It's Pixel Perfect and Maverick Communications. I know, Melody, you've been on the forefront of helping companies to make that transition digitally. I want to ask my next question that talks about policy, and I want to look strategically at both Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago as we proceed towards the end. And I want to encourage the viewers to continue to type your comments. I can see all the questions there in the chat, and I will address one or two of them towards the end. I want to ask Rutin my next question, and what are the policy considerations for the changing digital landscape of media? And I want us to take this discussion not only from the point of view of governments who have to enact legislation for access, etc., but also for companies that have to make that transition and that transformation that we heard Conrad refer to, where they prepare persons to function. Rufflin.
Okay, thank you. So I want to start with the companies, and of course I'm going to look specifically at my company first, but generally speaking, as we prepare to really take on the digital age, clearly one of the policies that we definitely need to have is that persons need, if you don't yet have one, you definitely need to start thinking of a social media policy. So for example, in my experience, we have one, but we've had to be amending it as we go along, because in this space, things change radically and things change quickly. So we've had to change our social media policy over the years in order to meet the dramatic changes that are taking place in the landscape. And one of the things that I'd love companies to do, I recognize, I don't know if Kiran has that experience in Trinidad, but in Jamaica, we still have a lot of companies that actually have not embraced social media to the point where our own employees are not allowed to access social media within the organization, which is an issue within itself, because you are almost dependent on the employees to be ambassadors and to help to spread the message, to help to share a message. And at the same time, they don't have access to the space, which does not really make sense, because they're able to access it on their phones, but you don't want them to access it on their computers. So we need to be more open as it relates to that. We need to definitely expand our minds and recognize that avoiding it is going to be, the losses are going to be greater than the benefits would have been. So we just have to embrace and move with the times, because it's not going anywhere. It's here to stay, and it's only going to get even more in depth as we get along, because this digital transformation is not moving away. It's gonna stay here, and we're gonna have to embrace it. We also need to embrace, and if we haven't yet done so, we need to really adjust the thing of flexible working arrangements. So those who've not yet done that work from home policy, you need to start doing that, because as we engage and hire our young people, a lot of them definitely, they're very great at what they do. They're very creative, very productive, but they don't necessarily have to be locked in that brick and mortar space on Knutsford Boulevard. They can work from in their bed, in their pajamas, if that's how it's going to work, and still give you the kind of productivity that you need. So these policies need to be developed as well as the work from home policy, or any kind of policy that actually addresses a flexible working arrangement. We also need to address the whole matter of network security, because as we move and delve more into digital transformation, network security is going to be key, because people have to understand that they have to be responsible about how they behave. You can't just allow anything within your network and then you cause problems. So it's something that our IT team will have to look at, and as an entity or as companies, we have to look at that as well.
Wonderful point. And I want to bring in Melody, someone who has also been on the forefront of institutional policies for your own private companies, but helping public companies and your clients to make that transition. Melody?
Well, just a quick one. When you were talking about the skills needed, I just want to go back to that very quickly, if you'll allow me. There are two things that I find that for me in hiring very critical. One, the persona outside of the workplace, how you represent my brand, even when you're not on the job, and time management skills. So I think those are 2 points that I really want to bring across to our students, most especially, to be very conscious and mindful of those 2 areas. Yes.
So those points are extremely important. Many of them feel like there is a difference between your public and your personal space, but the digital landscape has really subverted that.
Yes, it merges at a point. So we have to be very careful, because what does my brand represent and the ethos of the brand? You're outside of the office space. There has to be some representation of that as well, I believe.
Excellent point there. Excellent point. And as we speak about company policies, because certainly that would be part of any responsible company, would have to insist on that digital presence being managed. I want to bring in Kiran for your perspective in terms of the institutional policies, but also at the national level. What are some of those changes that need to be made?
I'm going to try to say this as quickly as I could, but I have to tell you, I could spend a week talking about this, because this is what I've done for most of my life, is advocate when it comes to policy, especially for media. I want to say that what I'm about to say is the most important thing that I would have said in this session. With any policy, any legislation that is coming before us in this region, ask yourselves if there is a threat to any of these. Freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of information, and the overall right of the public to know. And what I see happening with legislation in our region is that there's a lot of cut and paste. We saw it with the GDPR and data protection. And not everything is suited to our environment. Sometimes we don't know what legislation supersedes what other pieces of legislation. So this means that there has to be an effort by everyone involved, and everyone meaning it's not just about government and the lawmakers, it's about the faculty members at the university, it's about the students, because what you are doing here, making decisions that are going to rule your day-to-day lives. And in this case with the data protection, I mean, I'm really, really sad. It was a sad day for me this morning when I got up and saw the news. You have to look to your private companies and corporations, because very often those of us who are not dealing with the legislation on a day-to-day basis, we think it's okay, the lawmakers will handle it until it's passed, and then we get up one morning and realize how restricted we are. So ask yourselves those questions with anything: cybercrime bill, Freedom of Information Act, whistleblower legislation, interception of communication, anything that says cyber, anything that says data, anything. You have to ask yourself, does it restrict me from my right to know and my ability to express myself as freely as I could? And if your answer to any of those questions is yes, then there is a problem and you need to fight for your rights. We have to live in a society where we are not just happy, but that we are respected for who we are, and our opinions and choices are also respected.
Thank you for putting that point so very briefly, but you've said quite a lot, and I really want colleagues in Jamaica to respond to the perspective that you raised, because I know just last month, Jamaica passed its own data protection legislation, and that certainly has implications for the journalists operating nationally. And that would have been in response to the GDPR legislation at the European Union level, but most certainly to the changing digital landscape. So I don't know if Damian wants to respond to what Kiran has said.
Yes, in fact, I share some of the concerns that she has raised. In respect of the data protection for Jamaica, what you are going to be having is the commissioner who will, by virtue of this law, have the right to essentially request recordings and notes. And it somehow is exposing one of what we consider to be a very fundamental element of journalism, that is protecting your sources. When there is going to be someone who has that power, and that power vested in law, it is likely to eat away at the confidentiality in this process, which is also very, very important. I mean, just yesterday, the MAJ issued a statement raising some other concerns in respect of the Data Protection Act and what it will mean. And one of the concerns of the MAJ is that the data controller will not be able to present his or her case. And the data controller in this event would be the media house, for example, will not be able to present his or her case of information to the commissioner before determination is made in respect of an application challenging the use of personal data. So the commissioner under this new law will make a determination that could be adverse to the media entity without the media entity having an opportunity to present his or her case. Why did I use this picture? Why did I access this picture for my story? I've heard it before that it really speaks and reminds people of an autocracy. And I mean, that may be a strong way of putting it, but I really am uncomfortable with some of the provisions in this Data Protection, this Data Protection Act.
Thank you. And Melody, as someone who's worked not only in media, but on the corporate side, I mean, those policy changes, I know you started to speak about it, but I don't know if you wanted to continue to elaborate.
Well, mine is quite basic in terms of, because of the speed at which the digital world moves in, and because everybody's fighting for supremacy in terms of being the first, and you're competing with outside of the formal media houses, that we have to remain authentic and credible. Anything that we put out there, even though we're rushing to be ahead of the game, must be credible. We can't lose our credibility.
Excellent point. So I wanna ask my final question to the panel. I want Conrad to lead off on this. Contemplate for me the future of careers in media and communication. You're somebody on the forefront, but what is that going to look like? So you can unmute your mic.
Certainly the jobs of the future are totally different from what it was before. But I want to say to everybody that the fundamentals of certain things are the same, but the job itself may change, meaning some elements may be added or taken away from a particular job role that is new. But I'm gonna maybe leave some of the others for the rest of the team, which I think they will possibly discuss. But I'm gonna take some of the more advanced ones that we think students are not considering, and that's like ones in animation, because there's a rising trend of things like esports. It is young people playing games online, and you have to consider those things, and that will drive animation. That's going to drive game development. Those are some other types of media roles that are not the traditional media roles, but these are media roles because this is the content that will be consumed in the future, which is the virtual reality and the mixed reality. You're going to talk about 3D artists. So some people know, oh, I don't want to be a graphic designer. Okay, think about being a 3D artist, which is a mixture of graphic and also motion. I will also say to all of the people who are into graphics, you have to also consider being an interactive designer. Is a thing we use here, and interactive meaning GIFs and motion graphics, which is now the big trend all over social media, because now brands are communicating through GIFs, you know. So it's very important that they start thinking that you want to be relevant. It's not to be doing the jobs as we have done all the time, but do jobs that people actually know, that people want now. I would also say, for my final point in terms of roles that I think are necessary, is that people need to know that not all the roles are going to be creative. There are going to be roles going forward which is minimalistic, like project management, which includes time management. I'm sure some of the people here, some of those basic work is still going to be important. Communication skills, like somebody to communicate with some brand. So there are some basics that are there, but I would just like to touch on the more, I call it technology journalists, like Damian had talked about, which using data and journalism together. So there are those new roles, I would touch on those, that are necessary for me, for marketing and for content. Data science, which maybe these students will, content students won't necessarily appreciate. But if you can think about having a merger of the great market of the future, for me, is a person who understand content and also understand data and can pull the two together. And then you mix that group all together to work on a project. It's a mastermind group at this point. And I want them to start thinking that everything is going to be the same, but the traditional skills that you're taught at CARIMAC, whatever, those skills are still necessary. What you need to do is add skills to those as you go forward. That is more analytical and digital.
Thank you.
So that's really fun for me going forward.
Excellent point there, and I want to bring in Rufflin. Rufflin, contemplate. I know PR and marketing. Conrad has started to allude to the variety of skills that someone will need to have. Contemplate the future of careers in media and communication for you.
So it's very similar to what Conrad just said a while ago, because what you're going to find, or what we're finding right now, is that because of the emergence of the digital transformation that is taking place, a PR employer, an employee who's doing PR, is no longer just doing PR alone. You now need to be able to script and add. You now need to be able to take your phone and film something. Because let's say you have gone out there to hand out something. You want to make sure that the audience sees this. So you take your own camera and you film this event. Then you're editing on your phone. So you're now an editor. You're now doing videography. You're now doing television production. The thing is that one individual is now having a whole gamut of skills. And so people need to understand now that you don't limit yourself anymore. And even something that is your hobby. Let's say you just love to take pictures. Your hobby can now become a critical element of your professional life. So consider every little bit of what you do now to be something of value. And don't consider that it's only what you learn at CARIMAC, let's say, or whatever you learn at journalism school that is going to be critical. Just about anything you're picking up along the way. And as you relate to your mentors and other persons who you're talking to, you realize that you're going to get a lot of information that if you put them all together, they're going to create for you a dynamic individual who is able to function in this space, because it's really not about being unique anymore. You're not specific in terms of your role. You're going to be generalist. You're doing a whole bunch of things, and you're going to bring everything to bear on the function in order to be successful in your role and to make your brand a successful brand as well.
Thank you, Rufflin. I want to give the last word to Damian. Contemplate the future. I know you're already in the future, so to speak, but contemplate that future beyond the current time.
Yes, I think the media in the future, or careers in media in the future, really are going to be an amalgamation of some of the things we've talked about here. So yes, Rufflin, it's going to be that situation where you are able to work from home in your pajamas, but certainly not for a Zoom meeting. And you are going to have situations where retweets are equal to your views. In other words, it's going to encompass a whole different thinking in the people who are going to be pursuing these careers. It's going to be almost like a cell phone. You know, careers in media are going to be immediate. They're going to be revolutionary. They are going to be requiring much thought, and they're going to be requiring much deliberate action on the part of those who will seek to pursue these careers.
All right, thank you very much. I want to thank my panel of media and communication employers, senior managers, industry experts. Your insight has been excellent. It has been eye-opening. And I'm sure I'm seeing a number of students that I'm familiar with in the chat section acknowledging the points that you have made. I want to thank you, all right, for being here. Additionally, I must thank Dr. Nicole Plummer, the Associate Dean of Marketing and Outreach, for the Faculty of Humanities and Education. She's the one who conceptualized this and made it possible. Dr. Livingston White, I must thank him. He's the director of CARIMAC, and he has led CARIMAC's contribution to this virtual series by staging 3 panels, and this being the final panel. To Mr. Al McLaren and the CARIMAC technical team, I want to thank you, as well as Andre Forbes and Mr. Ishmael Preston from the UE Mona Media team, where we're broadcasting live, and also to Ms. Keisha Powell and Mr. Franz Irons from News Talk 93 FM. A special thank you to you, the audience, for tuning in to this final installment of the 3-part series on adaptability and digital transformation. Over the past 3 weeks, we've heard from faculty of CARIMAC, recent graduates from around the Caribbean, and today we've heard from industry players. We've covered the gamut of issues relevant to media and communication that will ensure you are more prepared to overcome the challenges and capitalize on opportunities that await in your future career. Thank you.